Hello, Pierre. Wonderful to have you here.
Such a joy for me. My favorite activity in life is communicating with others.
Yeah,
So you're giving me the opportunity of one more joy.
yes, my pleasure. Maybe it's nice to start with a prayer or a blessing.
I would love to. This is a prayer that came to me over 15 years ago, and that I use every time I have some personal intervention. I mean, either a conference or a workshop or an important interview, or just a personal encounter with someone. And for me, it's important because it's the elimination of the ego. And I think we are here, first of all, on earth to go beyond the ego. So it goes like this, very short. Shine as moon, and may I be so thee, that all those I encounter may experience me as thy radiant presence, thy unconditional love and forgiveness. May they no longer see me, but only, only, only thee. There we are. That's all.
Thank you. Yeah, it's. I guess it's nice to start with a prayer or blessing because it's, yeah, it moves me more into stillness.
Exactly. Exactly.
You have just published a new book, 365 Blessings to Heal Myself and the World. That seems very appropriate. So there are 365 blessings, one for every day, I assume.
Yes.
Um,
Exactly.
so would you say it is a discipline in that sense?
What do you mean a discipline?
Well, a discipline, a Course in Miracles, for instance, consists of a textbook and a workbook.
Oh, yes, yes, yes.
And there's a lesson for every day.
Okay.
So is that how the book is meant to basically
Well,
study?
the aim of the book, more than, I mean, some people use it every day, and I myself use it practically every day, although I don't go one day after another.
Yeah.
The topics I come to back quite often, like child soldiers, or all blessings concerning children, street children, children who are working. But it's to show that there are so many different blessings on so many different themes, including one of my favorite one is on making love, that it's to show people that spirituality applies to absolutely everything. As a matter of fact, I'm not interested in a spirituality that doesn't cover every single situation we can encounter in life.
Yeah.
So that's the essential aim of the book, is to show that blessing can apply to any situation on earth. And I'm constantly learning lessons about blessing. One of the most recent lesson, and one of the most important spiritual lessons of my life since the past year. I bless people. I have no car. I travel a lot by public transport. I love blessing people in the bus, in the train, in the street. And for about a year, I preceded the blessing by saying, I love you. And to really look at someone, Marek, that you don't know, and to feel the blessing, feel that statement, boy, it makes you make a gigantic step. Because whether we like it or not, we have so many gut reactions to people's faces, their dressing, their behavior. And you have to go totally beyond that. And it's a tremendous discipline. And I'm so grateful to have discovered this, because it's It's one of the most demanding activities I've ever encountered. I would say in 60 years, at least over 50 years of intense spiritual seeking and striving. And it's wonderful. The only thing I can say, as I say about anything concerning blessing, is try it. Don't believe me. I start all my workshops by saying, don't believe a single word I say unless you can prove it in your own life.
Yes.
So that's my sense of it. And I was on the bus in the street this morning just before coming and doing just that. And I'm still, encountering little inner resistances to some people's faces. And so I really stay with it until I feel this love. You see, blessing is 100% heart activity, Mary. A blessing that is just said for me has absolutely no healing power.
Yeah.
To have healing power, blessing must be felt. And I've had personally amazing experiences of instantaneous changes in people's attitudes through silent blessing. And on my website, gentleartofblessing.org, there's a whole section, which is my favorite section, of course, on healings through blessing. Can I tell you one of my favorite?
Oh, yes, please. Yeah.
Oh,
that was actually one of my questions. How does a blessing transform from just saying words, being just words, into a transformative thing, an actual blessing?
Okay, well, so before my story, I will reply to your question. I think it's so important. I believe the 3 pillars of the spiritual path are intention, a really clear intention, a deep sincerity. Mary Baker Eddy, who's an American metaphysician of the 19th century, once said, and it's a sentence that carried me through a terrible, traumatic tsunami I went through for 3 years some time ago. She said, a deep sincerity is sure of success, for God takes care of it. And if the word God bothers you, you can replace it by divine love, by the source, by what is meaningful for you. And the third quality is perseverance. One doesn't reach anything without great perseverance. So intention, sincerity, and perseverance are essential in any realm. Now, when I discovered blessing, I explained the beginning of the book that I was in a situation where I had to choose between keeping a job that I loved and which was where I was really excelling, doing very, very good work, and accepting something very unethical, or quitting my job. And the people who put me, especially one guy who was a militant atheist who hated my guts, he decided he wanted to get rid of me. He was one of the 4 directors of the 4 organizations that funded my work. So he organized a whole setup so that I would be put in a situation where I had to choose. And of course, I couldn't choose between keeping my job and losing my integrity. So I quit my job. And I developed this intense resentment. And resentment is terrible. It's like a rat gnawing your entrails. And after, I did praying, meditating, reading spiritual text, everything that you should do to get rid of this resentment. And it was there from morning to night, month after month. And I knew I was harming myself. And then one day, the statement of Jesus in the Sermon on the Mount, bless those who curse you. Pierre, of course. It's so simple. You just need to bless them. And there and then I started blessing them in their health, in their joy, in their work, in their relations, in every conceivable manner. First, it was in the mind. It was in obedience to what I believed to be a divine order, a divine revelation. But after 3 months, it moved down to the heart, because blessing is, as I said, 100% heart energy. And then I started blessing people everywhere, in the post office, in the street, in the supermarket, on the trains. I used to travel the whole length of trains, both ways, to be sure to bless every single person on that train. And it was such a joy. And that is, of course, blessing from the heart. So this is essential. Blessing is 100% heart energy, but you might have to work on it quite a lot to get there. That's where perseverance comes in. And of course, a blessing has to be totally sincere. Otherwise, it has no healing impact again. So now let me tell you one of my favorite stories that people will find on the website. This gentleman who was the head of one of the large shops of the largest supermarket chain in Switzerland, got into a very bad depression, and his psychiatrist sent him to a clinic where he had all these terrible treatments and drug upon drug. And after a few months, it seemed to be slowly improving, and he left the clinic, and after a few weeks, he was able to start his work again. And after 2-3 months of work, he felt he was sliding back into this deep depression. And he was desperate, and he returned to his psychiatrist. And this is the amazing thing. The psychiatrist said, "Mr. So-and-so," I don't want to say his name, "I refuse to give you any drugs." This is a psychiatrist speaking. "Here is what I give you." He gave him my book, The Gentle Art of Blessing, and Eckhart Tolle's book, The Power of Now. And this man started blessing, blessing, blessing. And his letter on the site is a cry of joy. He said, as head of a supermarket shop chain, I have many opportunities to bless all day long. And it got him out, just got him out of his depression. And as a matter of fact, at the moment, I can't say that most Swiss psychiatrists distribute my book. I hope it'll come one day. But I find this is a beautiful story.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there's so many others like that. I mean, I've been receiving first letters before internet, now emails, for 30 years on the power of this very simple practice. So simple that a child can do it, to heal and to bless, and to heal and to change a situation.
For a child, it's probably easier because it doesn't have the gatekeeper.
Exactly, Marek. And one of the characteristics of the book is that after 12 blessings, after 12 blessings, I have a testimony of healing. And I remember this letter, this email from this pregnant mother in England who wrote to me that she was pregnant and she already had 2 kids, and life was challenging, and she sometimes got upset with her children, and she was upset for getting upset. And then she discovered my book, and she said, a pregnant mother with 2 small children is really unemployed. But one afternoon she decided to take a little moment to go into the garden and just have a moment with blessing and my book. And all of a sudden, her 3-year-old child called her and ran down the steps and ran up to her, put his arms around her leg and said, "Mommy, I bless you." And she said, I'd never mentioned a word to him. Where did he get that? You know, one of the most important statements of Jesus for me is, if you do not become like little children,
Yeah.
you will not enter the kingdom of God. And, you know, I studied theology before I studied sociology. My father was a priest. And I can't read a book of theology today anymore. It's so complex, and it's all in the mind.
Yeah.
And that's what I like also about the Course in Miracles. It's in the heart.
Yeah.
It's not mind stuff.
I like how Course in Miracles says, giving and receiving are one in truth.
Exactly. Exactly. When you bless, you are blessed.
Yeah.
It's such an incredible blessing.
Yeah.
Because you are blessed each time you bless someone sincerely.
It's by the way, it's funny that I just took a look, and today's lesson in Course in Miracles is, I think, let me look it up. It's lesson 270, and it says, the title is, I will not use the body's eyes today. And
Wow.
yeah, I can see how that relates to blessings.
Absolutely.
Yeah, because it's not looking so much, right, with the eyes, with the physical senses, but it's seeing, I suppose, with the heart.
Exactly, Marek.
Yeah.
With the eyes of the heart.
Yeah.
The heart has its own eyes.
Yeah. Yeah, and by doing that, you I suppose you bring forth, which is already there, has already been there forever, but unseen to the physical eye.
Exactly. You know, Marek, we live in a society of constant distraction. Constantly. We are being pulled out of ourselves by this constant advertising, this music, which is often noise, the physical noise, and it's so difficult to stay centered.
Yeah.
And especially when you're on a spiritual path, it's a huge challenge, because we are also submitted to all the same distractions as others, and sometimes we succumb to them. And blessing is one of the most formidable and possibly simplest ways of staying constantly centered. Now, I'm not blessing the whole time, but I bless more and more. And it's such, you know, again, in the bus, we have these little advertising videos that are passing the whole time, at least in the Geneva buses. You can't be in a bus unless you turn away and decide not to look at them. So
Yeah.
I prefer looking at the people and blessing them than looking at the little advertising videos. So, and another distraction, of course, is the portable. I mean, I'm just amused.
Yeah.
Especially among young people. I mean, the extent of the impact and the importance of the portable in their lives. And it's becoming a psychiatric disease. I mean, they're already psychiatrists specializing in the impact of portable. And so it's so important to be able to resource oneself from the inside and not the outside.
Yeah, the outside is incredibly fragmented.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I guess that's what the world teaches us, right? I mean, everything is outside. Aspire outside. It's even crazy. Like if you listen to songs or love songs, it's always outside, loving
Exactly.
somebody else, or you'll be happy if somebody loves you.
And you know, fashion and appearance is primary in our culture.
Yeah.
All outside. That's so unimportant. I'm really so unimportant. But unless you've had a deep spiritual, personal experience, it's difficult to understand it.
Yeah.
To believe that there is something invisible which has infinite value is difficult to understand. I guess one of my favorite activities in life is being in silent adoration. Silence is becoming more and more important. Joel Goldsmith, that wonderful American mystic of the last century, who was also an incredible healer, said the only way of really praying is being silent and listening to God,
Yeah.
not talking to an omniscient mind who knows everything in advance, but listening what this infinitely loving mind has to tell us.
Yeah. How, I'm wondering, you were studying the Sermon on the Mount, and then something clicked, right?
Yes?
And how would you describe your relationship or personal relationship with God or Jesus, the universe?
Can I first share one wonderful lesson I learned from a very modest Muslim imam in a shanty town of Dakar?
Yeah.
I belonged to a spiritual teaching which was so sure that it was the ultimate revealed truth for mankind. That's a very heavy claim to carry.
Yeah.
And I was, you know, gung-ho in this teaching, such a faithful student, doing everything I should do, and so superior to other faiths and practices and philosophies and religions, because of course, I thought naively, incredibly naively, I left the movement ages ago, that it was the truth. And I lived in Dakar for 5 years. I lived many years in Africa. And for 5 years, I lived between two shanty towns. And I mean, just a few hundred yards from them. They were on each side of my little bungalow. And Saturday afternoons, the young kids would come and have a Moroccan green tea in my home. And one of the kids was the son of the local imam, a very modest, gentle, soft-spoken man. And one Sunday afternoon, I thought, well, I'm going to visit Imam Sal and ask him how Islam defines God. Eric, I was so sure, of course, I had the right reply because there was a clear definition of God in a few sentences in our textbook. And my state of mind, as I strode along the beach, because it was the two shanty towns and my little bungalow were on the beach, I strode along the beach, and my state of mind was very close to that of the wonderful Japanese proverb, which says, it's very difficult to describe the infinite horizons of the ocean to the frog sitting at the bottom of his well. And I was right at the bottom of my little well of self-righteousness.
Yeah.
Oh, stinking self-righteousness. And
Closed.
Completely closed. And little box, you know, I was boxed in. And I got to Imam Sal's and we greeted each other as usual. And I said, Imam Sal, I've come to ask you, how does Islam define God? And the little frog in me, Marek, had the surprise of its life. He said, Pierre, in his gentle tone, if you took all the branches of all the trees in the world as pens and the water of all the seas, oceans, lakes, rivers, streams of the world as ink. You couldn't write out all the names, in other words, all the qualities of God. In other words, God is undefinable.
Yeah.
And boy, was that a lesson for me. So, for me, God is a absolute, undefinable, some kind of supreme intelligence, because when I look at the universe, nature, I'm in total awe. Just our body is something like 32 trillion cells, 32 with, or 35, 37, doesn't matter, with 12 zeros after that. We do nothing to make it function, practically nothing. We sleep a little, we eat, but all the rest is self-controlling mechanism. And so there's evidently an incredible intelligence. And this intelligence is infinitely loving. And after, I will like to share with you the most profound mystical experience I had in my life, which convinced me that love is the basis of everything. So I believe, I have no specific definition of God, except the one I felt in this mystical experience. So this experience happened, and I'd like to say I belong to no religion, no teaching, no specific spiritual path, but I'm open to everything I think has integrity, beauty, truthfulness. And so I was in Africa at the time. I was coming back from a meeting of a large peasant organization of which I was one of the founding members in Africa. And the last day of the meeting, I caught dysentery, and I did my spiritual work to get rid of it. At the beginning, it's not serious, but it's nuisance because you always have to constantly run to the toilet. And I thought it had disappeared. I went out in the evening with an African friend to an African restaurant. The next day, I left to go home to my home in Geneva. And on the way to the airport, the dysentery started all over again. And on the plane, I was working with my affirmations, my mantras, my spiritual texts, my prayers and all that. Next to me, I had a small unaccompanied boy. And the stewardess who was taking him was so loving. I've never seen anything like that. One could have thought she was his mother. She constantly came to check that he was okay. And at one moment, she spoke to him with special tenderness. And I felt for this woman such gratitude, which became a sort of cosmic gratitude. And suddenly I was no longer in the plane, no longer in time. I was in a space, Murray, where there was only an infinite, incredible feeling of unbelievable love. Love was the only cause, the only effect, the only presence, the only law, the only reality. There was nothing else but love. And it was entirely, Marek, on the level of feeling. But the wonderful thing is Pierre Pradervand had disappeared completely. I no longer had a sense of human identity, hence there was no longer any ego. And for a few moments, the divine consciousness was my consciousness. I don't know how long it lasted, 5 minutes or half an hour, because I was out of time. But suddenly I was back in my plane seat. I felt something move in my entrails. In a few seconds, the dysentery had disappeared. But of course, the real healing was my vision of reality, that I really believe we live in an infinitely benevolent universe, totally based on love. And all the trials we go through are sent by this love to help us learn exactly the lessons we need to learn. Some years ago, I went through a terrible tsunami. Mary, everything in my life, after 40 years spiritual work, everything fell through. My marriage, my health. I had the greatest health challenge in my existence with very negative medical predictions. My energy dropped, so my workshops fell through, hence my income fell through. And the last residues of the spiritual path blew into smithereens. And for 3 years, I was in absolute hell, even at moments with suicidal thoughts. I didn't know how I would ever get out of this. And of course, as always, grace intervened and pulled me out of it in a very unexpected manner. And today, Mary, I give thanks for this experience because I needed very thorough inner spring cleaning, especially to get rid of the last residues of this narrowness of the former spiritual path I was on. I really need to really shake up, and I got it. And today I can say, thank you, thank you, thank you. And I have a better relationship with my wife than I ever had before, and life is smiling again. So, but this fundamental belief now accompanies me every day that we live in an infinitely benevolent universe, which is totally based on love and will bring us all one day to the point of absolute perfection and unconditional love. If Jesus said, be perfect as your Father is perfect, either this is totally insane, I mean, this man was raving mad, or he was just saying, making a basic statement of non-dualism, that we already run with one with the source. How can we be different from the source if we already are one with it?
Yeah.
Now, of course, these are nice words I'm telling you, but I have to practice them, Mary. And I'm still, I have to say, I'm in the kindergarten of the spiritual path. But it's wonderful to think one day I'll get a little further. So
how does your practice look like? Throughout the day, you bless. You're in public transport. You bless. But is there something you do in the morning or evening, for instance?
Well, of course. In the morning, normally I take an hour and a half of spiritual work for meditation. And I have nothing absolutely rigorously fixed because for 40 years I was so rigorous and disciplined and ultra disciplined. And that took me to the doors of hell. And now I just listen. I follow my intuition. But I take an hour and a half. Sometimes I listen to one of the beautiful meditations by Dr. Joe Dispenza, who's one for me, he's one of the great minds of the planet today. And other days I do just my own meditations. And of course, I use my book on blessings every morning.
Yeah.
To bless various situations in the world, because we are not the only one who needs healing. The book is called Blessings to Heal Myself and Heal the World, and you can't separate them. My healing depends on the healing of the world. Also, I'm totally at the opposite of this cubbyhole spirituality, where you feel that's one of the great dangers today I see. So many people getting on a spiritual kick, getting a tremendous kick out of their little spiritual path.
Yeah.
But it's so selfish.
Yeah.
So turned inwards,
So isolated.
Yes. What's it called? There's a book came out a few years ago, Spiritual Bypassing, or I don't know, something like that. Well, so that's a real danger. We must always remember that we are one with everything.
Yeah.
And the child, the 6-year-old child, knotting carpets or weaving clothes in Pakistan or Bangladesh is our brother and sister. And until they are healed, the social situation is healed, we need to heal ourselves. And this can have very practical consequences. There's a wonderful organization in Switzerland called Public Eye, which denounces major scandals in the area of international development. And it's just denounced a major scandal in India, where the Swiss company Syngenta, which makes seeds and pesticides, this is a pesticide banned in Switzerland and all over Europe years ago as cancerous, as a carcinogenic, and many other negative effects. But it's sold in India. And in this whole area, India, where it was being widely used, they've had dozens and dozens of deaths. And I'm going to buy a share in this company and go to the shareholders meeting. And I did this already in the 80s. I got to speak with a CEO of Nestle company because of one little question I raised in the shareholders meeting. And they were so upset because this was the first time Swiss shareholders were doing this.
What was that question?
It's about the magic cubes in Africa. Nestle makes little cubes which is kind of sauce, but they are 60% salt and all sorts of colorings, artificial colorings, and they have absolutely not an ounce of nutritional value. And they are displacing massively these traditional African sources with lots of vitamins and proteins, which were an essential part of the food. And so I plan to go to the next Syngenta shareholders meeting, but I will prepare this with intense meditation and blessing, and go to the shareholders meeting without an ounce of self-righteousness or pointing my finger at these naughty devils. I will say, I will speak as a shareholder. Can we allow ourselves to continue enriching ourselves on the deaths of poor farmers in India? And I will use the we. We'll see what happens. But for me, this is all part of my explanation that spirituality has to be lived in the world, not only in my bedroom.
Yeah.
Not only in the local church. There's a wonderful statement that says that, that sitting in a church or some meeting and thinking you are spiritual is like sitting in a garage and thinking you're a car. I love that statement. Sitting in a garage doesn't make you a car. Being part of a church or a religion or a spiritual movement doesn't make you necessarily spiritual. It's only when the heart is transformed, when there's a fire of love in the heart, that transformation starts.
Yeah. And of service, I suppose. When you want to serve, if you aim to serve, you move beyond the little self, the small.
Of course. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No. That was it. One of the questions I had prepared was, how do service and blessing relate? But I suppose they're the same, even.
Yes, Marek. Blessing, if it's done from the heart, is a real service. But I'd like to say, you could be a healer and stay in your office, never move from your office practically, and be a world servant of the first class. I take again the example of Joel Goldsmith, who's one of my great spiritual inspirations. He created a movement called the Infinite Way. Joel Goldsmith. There's a website on him and all that. And at one moment of his career, he used to receive well over 100 phones for healing per day in his office. And most of the cases were healed and sometimes instantaneously. Well, he was a major world server, but he didn't budge from his office. You don't have to go to a shareholders meeting in Detroit or Washington or Basel or London to be spiritually active. Everyone is led if they listen to what is right for them. And so I would never ever dare tell a person what form their service must take. That's a silent dialogue between the infinite and themselves. I'm privileged to have an extraordinary wife who's the person I admire most on the planet. And she works 70 to 80 hours a week, unpaid, for a foundation she created herself for women and children's rights. And she's done major things on the planetary level. And she just lives to serve. And she doesn't take days off. She doesn't take vacations. She's just the living illustration of service. But it comes from a very deep spiritual basis. So everyone, that's almost a platitude, must find his own way. No one can tell you. That's why I think religions are on the way out, because they've tended, and they were necessary for a long time. They played a useful role for a long time, but now we're going further. We no longer need theologians and holy books to tell us how to live, although they can be very useful. I love the Psalms and the New Testament. But ultimately, we are living in a new era where more and more people will have to listen to what their conscience, their heart tells them is right for them, and not receive that from an outside authority. And that's true as in the field of medicine as it is in the field of spirituality. I mean, I was brought up in a family where the house doctor was the god of the family. I mean, nobody would have thought of ever contesting anything. And he was a very sweet and good man and consecrated MD. But the fellow I had, when I had this tsunami, the fellow I saw, who told me this was, unless I had this very heavy chemical and radiotherapy, what do you call them? I've forgotten the English names. When you have these.
The shock therapy?
Not shock. Where you put in a machine and you get radiation.
Right, the chemo.
Chemo and the other, well, whatever.
Yeah.
He spoke with immense authority, telling me that if I didn't follow this treatment, I would go to hell. He said it a little kinder than that. And I just refused his authority. And I listened to what my inner guide, my inner voice, told me. And I think one of my favorite statements is that wonderful verse from the Old Testament: I shall send an angel to guard you on your way and to take you to the place I have prepared. The place is already prepared for every single person. You just have to trust and accept the guidance.
Wonderful. I think we're running out of time.
Yes.
I wrote one blessing down of yours, which I found.
Yes.
Maybe it's a good idea if I read it out loud, and then you add another blessing, and then we'll say
Sure.
goodbye to all the viewers.
Yes, wonderful.
Okay. Let me see. So this is a blessing for the morning. On awakening, bless this day, for it is already full of unseen good, which your blessings will call forth. For to bless is to acknowledge the unlimited good that is embedded in the very texture of the universe and awaiting each and all.
Yes.
Lovely.
That's from the text, my text, The Gentle Art of Blessing.
Yeah.
By the way, on the website, there is the most wonderful video on that text. I recommend that all persons who are interested look at that video, which has been seen by over 300,000 people.
Yeah.
It is by Jane Young, who's our webmaster, and it is so inspired. Well, you know, out of 365 blessings, I have difficult choice, but I'm going to make one. I hope you'll not be too startled or shocked. I'd like to read the one, A Blessing for Making Love, to show people that blessing applies to that spirituality applies to absolutely every situation, and it can make everything beautiful. You know, love making can be one of the most holy, I insist, holy activities in a person's life. If one takes the original sense of the word holy, which means whole and healthy. May our love making be a perfect expression of your love for us, an experience of ecstatic beauty and profound depth. May we put our partner's pleasure before our own and be most sensitive to their most subtle wish and hidden desire. May our bodies become instruments playing music for your glory, and our hearts be filled with the music of soul. May we, in the rush of busy lives, find refreshment for our souls, a sigh of peaceful rest for our bodies, and a special moment of green pastures for our deeper being. May it cement our togetherness in the unique way true lovemaking restores both body and soul, while at the same time being a gentle playground for the child in us. And above all, may it strengthen our commitment of faithfulness to each other, in the understanding that we are both each other's keepers and the keepers of our spoken and unspoken vows. There we are.
Wonderful. I want to thank you.
Marek, I'm the one who says thank you. You made me such a precious gift.
My pleasure.
Really. I feel such a wonderful bond with you in just 1 hour. That's the beauty of communication.
It is, yeah.
We are on the same path, the same family, the same aim, and the same spirit.
Yeah. Unified, huh?
Absolutely. Thank you, thank you, thank you for enabling me to share one of my deepest, holiest, strongest strivings in my existence, which I know can change lives, because I, for 30 years, have been receiving letters from people who say that it has changed their life.
Yeah. I love it how you are of service to others, to the world.
But that's my joy. Like, it's not a duty.
No, no.
You know, I give courses on retirement. I've been doing this for businesses and now the post office for years. In Switzerland, one retires at 65, and I'm never going to retire. I don't want to retire.
Never do.
I only do things I love. Like my wife, she's never going to retire. How could you retire when you're doing something useful?
Yeah.
That gives you joy. That is creative. Fun.
Yeah.
Spirituality doesn't have to be heavy. It shouldn't be heavy. If it's heavy, there's something wrong with it. It should be full of joy.
Yeah. And you tap into that joy.
Yes, absolutely.
I say thank you.
Thank you. And I bless you, Marek, in extraordinary, such important work you are doing to heal the world. The most important activity in the world today, and I'm rarely categorical, but I am for this, is raising world consciousness in every single area. And that is what you are doing. So thank you. Right on.
I say au revoir.
Au revoir.
Bye.
Bye, my friend.
Bye bye.